His Excellency Munu Mahavar, Her Excellency Deepa Vadva, Mr. Ahmed Rais, President, Indian School Al Gubra and Chairman of E.A.MUNC, Mrs. Papri Ghosh, Principal, Indian School Al Gubra, Mr. G. Srikumar, Vice Principal, Indian School Al Gubra, Mrs. Pyaraja Siddar, Vice Principal, Indian School Al Gubra International, faculty advisors of the 47 schools spread across 10 countries, Team E.A.MUNC at Indian School Al Gubra, and esteemed delegates. Good afternoon. It is a matter of great honor to host the 5th edition of the E. Ahmed Model United Nations Conference 2020 on the occasion of the 75th year of the formation of the United Nations. I, Neetu Andrews Machlith, head girl of Indian School Al Gubra, am delighted to welcome you to the first virtual conference of E.A.MUNC. We begin with the opening remarks from the Secretary General, Hiba Zafar Zaidi.
Global challenges have neither geographical nor political affiliations. They care not for international treaties and agreements, a fact solidified by the pandemic, which has brought the world to a standstill for months. In the face of the rapidly changing global front, humanity finds itself at crossroads. Economies of several countries are coming to a halt. Respected Chief Guest, His Excellency Munu Mahavar, Her Excellency Deepa Vadva, Mr. Ahmed Rais, President of Indian School Al Gubra and Chairman of E.A.MUNC, faculty advisors who took the time to be here with us, all the delegates, and Team E.A.MUNC. A very good afternoon to you all. Today, the 24th of October 2020, the United Nations completes 75 years of coordinating world responses to global challenges. And what better way to celebrate than with the Nobel Peace Prize being awarded to the World Food Programme, a primary wing of the Food and Agricultural Organization, for its efforts to combat hunger. Despite the pandemic that our world must currently grapple with, or perhaps because of it, it has become more important than ever to unify, to uphold the sanctity of constructive discourse, and to envision a future without the challenges that plague us all as humankind. The events of the past year have laid bare the extent of systemic inequalities, not only on the global stage, but also in our own communities. The barbarities of war, the catastrophic ramifications of climate change, and the heavy burden of prejudice and discrimination are responsible for denying our fellow human beings the right to be heard. As obliged as we are for the plethora of opportunities we get to make our voices heard, it is imperative to acknowledge that this privilege is not universal. As a result, the theme of our conference this year is getting ahead of global challenges. The topics being discussed at our conference are based on an increasingly complex set of realities, from the implementation and improvement of food security systems in Africa to combating illicit organ trafficking, among others. At E.A.MUNC, we are constantly planning and innovating in order to provide a high quality and immersive experience for our delegates and advisors. It is this multidimensionality that we hope to capture at our conference. If there is one thing that each and every one of you takes away from this conference, I hope that it is the fact that when all is said and done, we are not characterized by partisan battles. No matter how diverse we may be, what we all have in common is our humanity. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Hiba. Ensuring an equitable future for the coming generations is indeed the very essence of E.A.MUNC. We will now watch a video address by the Secretary General of the United Nations Antonio Guterres.
Our world faces the biggest test since the Second World War. In these trying times, I welcome the holding of your Model UN activity. Your commitment to international cooperation is essential for tackling the COVID-19 pandemic. We can only defeat the coronavirus if we do so globally. We must come together and support the most vulnerable. The United Nations is undertaking a wide-ranging response calling for a global ceasefire and working to control the pandemic, save lives, mitigate the socio-economic damage, fight stigma and recover better. I draw great hope from seeing your generation mobilized to address the challenges of our time and to build a healthier, more equitable and sustainable future for all. I wish you a successful Model UN.
Encouraging words from the Secretary General. I'm sure the delegates have a lot to take home from his message. Our chief guest this afternoon, His Excellency Munnu Mahavar, assumed charge of the post of Ambassador of India to the Sultanate of Oman on 21st August 2018. He joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1996 and has served in diplomatic missions in Moscow and Geneva. May I request the chief guest, His Excellency Munnu Mahavar, to address the gathering.
Today's keynote speaker and my former senior colleague, Ambassador Deepa Gopalan Vadhva, members of Board of Directors of Indian Schools in Oman, President and members of Board of Directors of School Management Committee of Indian School Al Gobra, principals, teachers, and dear students. I'm delighted to join all of you for E.A.MUNC Model United Nations Conference. Sri Ahmed had a very distinguished political career. He served twice as Minister of State for External Affairs, and in that capacity, he was in charge of affairs related to the Gulf countries, among his other responsibilities. He also represented India at the United Nations. While I didn't have the opportunity to work directly under him, I did have occasions to see him in action. So when I arrived in Muscat and I was informed that there is a Model United Nations instituted in his memory, I was really happy to know that. And I had the opportunity to join all of you last year for last year's event. And I thank Al Gubra School for inviting me again this year. I personally feel that events like Model United Nations, they are extremely useful for students in developing a broader perspective. They enable the participants to experience in a simulated environment the challenges that stakeholders face while dealing with global issues. I personally have had the privilege of representing India in United Nations Human Rights Council and in some other organizations. Of course, I also had the opportunity to head the division that dealt with UN political matters.
Excellency, I think you need to unmute yourself.
There seems to be a technical issue. Please excuse the delay. We will now move on to a video which illustrates the true spirit of E.A.MUNC Model United Nations Conference, highlighting our purpose and our vision.
First, when he visited as an emissary of Indira Gandhi to deliver an official message from the Indian government to His Majesty. Since then, we personally and the families were together, and his demise was a great loss to me personally and to our family. One thing Mr. Ahmed Saab was very focused or very particular about, whenever there is an injustice is seen, he will fight with the tooth and nails. And that should be the motto of each and one of you delegates.
I requested my dear friend E.A.MUNC to conduct this next seminar in Calicut.
Discussing more importantly on human rights. I hope you actually focus more on that.
I have never seen a politician who can be so cordial, so open, so transparent, and so sincere as the E.A.MUNC.
The Palestinian ambassador came all the way from Delhi to Kannur.
ശരിക്കും പാർലമെന്റിൽ എത്തിപ്പെട്ടവർ അവരുടെ ഒരു പേപ്പർ പ്രസന്റേഷൻ നടത്തുന്ന പോലെ അതൊക്കെ വലിയ ഇത് ഫാന്റാസ്റ്റിക് പ്രോഗ്രാമാണ്.
intention of MUNC is creating a thinking generation, conflict resolution, research, and overall the personality of the child to improve.
Because you are not only the leaders of tomorrow.
We have been encouraging our children to take part in MUNs because we think that it is a big learning experience for all our children. We aim to teach our children to become global citizens, and I think MUN is a big way of learning.
Excellent hospitality, excellent time management, and excellent content.
E.A.MUNC Model Recognition Conference is a conference of the students, for the students, and by the students.
There is great enthusiasm amongst the students.
I believe that we can build a strong and powerful generation ahead.
MUN was very professional.
I'm happy when they're happy. They have to speak in public, so I love seeing them.
It is a very good platform for learning.
In terms of leadership, their communicative skills, their debate skills.
I am very happy to be here is because I do take some special interest in UN affairs. In my previous assignments, I have served in India's permanent mission to the UN in Geneva from 2005 to 2008, from where I participated as India's delegate in the meetings on human rights and humanitarian affairs, including migration and disaster risk reduction. I'm sure all of you, particularly the students here, would play a role.
I would like to congratulate and thank the organizers of the event.
These conferences give students to research topics for a country.
We are very pleased to have you here in ISG, Sultanate of Oman. I hope you have made new friends, learned something new, and take back with you a wonderful memory.
Due to some technical issues, our chief guest's speech was cut short. I now request our chief guest, His Excellency Munu Mahavar, to address the gathering.
Hope I'm audible. Well, just to resume from where I had left, today we are meeting on the UN Day, and this year marks the 75th anniversary of the UN's establishment. And therefore, I feel the theme you have chosen, that is getting ahead of global challenges, is both relevant and appropriate. And we are really fortunate to have with us today an eminent personality like Ambassador Wadhwa, who has had long experience of working and representing India in several multilateral institutions. And I'm sure all of you will benefit tremendously from her side. It's really a personal pleasure also, ma'am, to see you. Hope you will also visit Oman in person and remember the old days. Well, students, the landmark anniversaries like the 75th year is also an occasion when we look back, reflect, and make an honest assessment of the performance of an organization, its achievements, its failures, and then we identify ways of improving the functioning. The UN had organized a special session this year, and I would encourage all the participants and students to listen to the statements that have been made by the world leaders on this occasion. I would like to share some of my own views and thoughts in my assessment, and of course, everyone will agree with this, that in 75 years, the UN has had many successes and some failures. And if we put in very simple words, then on the success side, we have not had a World War III. Globally accepted rules and norms have been developed. which provide the framework for global governance. Hundreds of millions of people have been lifted out of poverty. UN interventions have helped diffuse several crises and conflict situations. But on the other hand, a large part of the population is still deprived of basic needs. We continue to see new conflicts breaking out. The international terrorism continues unabated, and the goal of universal disarmament is nowhere in sight. This year, of course, the world is facing the challenge of COVID-19, and due to highly interconnected nature of our world, this epidemic has spread faster than any previous pandemic. Normally, one would have expected the international community to come together and the UN to take a lead in formulating a global response. But what we are seeing is a fragmented response with countries mainly dealing with the crisis at national levels. It's not that there have not been any international collaboration. There are countries which have come forward and shared their resources, India being one of them. We have provided medicine to more than 150 countries. And at the UN, Prime Minister committed that Indian vaccine production and delivery capacity will be used to help all humanity at this crisis. While Corona is the immediate challenge we are confronting, there are several other challenges, and the UN and the global community has set itself a target in the form of Sustainable Development Goals. But when we assess the effectiveness of UN at this occasion, we realize that the need for reform is obvious, and that is primarily because the UN and other international organizations were created after the World War II, but new actors have emerged who have the capacity to contribute, but they are still not a part of the decision-making process. So dear students, most of you would be aware that India would be joining the UN Security Council on 1st of January 2021. And the reforms of UN and multilateral system in general has been identified as a top priority for India. And as our Minister, External Affairs Minister recently said, as a founding member, India is deeply invested in the success of the UN. One thing is quite obvious, that global challenges require global response and all of us to work together. And I'm sure all you students would be playing some role in shaping the global response to future global challenges, either directly or indirectly. And your experience of participating in events like this one would really help you prepare for that role. So I wish all of you success in your future endeavors, and it's a great pleasure to join again Indian School Al Gubra for this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Your words will guide our delegates through the course of this conference. May I now request the President of Indian School Al Gubra and Chairman of E.A.MUNC, Mr. E.A.MUNC Reis, to deliver his address.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very excited to be here today. Especially, this is the 5th edition of the E.A.MUNC, which we are conducting. I'm very excited for one of the reasons, because we have two one of the best diplomats with us. One is our ambassador, Manu Mahavir, and Mrs. Deepa Vadva Gopalan. Both these diplomats are for us to emulate, for you to understand them, and probably one of, in a few years' time, I would see a few of you at least in one of these diplomatic positions. And we would be extremely pleased if you could see one of you as an ambassador of India or any of your country which you represent here in this tumultuous world which we are here. Today, we have parallelly doing a YouTube also, not to congest our Wi-Fi's. So we have a huge people watching us on YouTube simultaneously also. one of the objectives of having this MUNC is specifically to create a thinking generation. And I think we've been quite successful in it because we have a very, very active alumni who has been running into thousands, who has been very, very active. And most of them, when I did my first session and when I asked the children, like, how many of you, and that was in a school where we had very few students who spoke English, and all of them spoke in wonderful English. And they said that all of them would like to see a politician in a diplomatic or in a United Nations environment. I'm so pleased that whatever we are trying to do in a small way has been quite successful. This time itself, we have over 10 countries, 47 schools, and 420 or 430 students participating in this conference. We're extremely pleased. I hope you would all enjoy, especially in this particular times of challenges and social distancing is the norms of the thing. We've been able to do it on a virtual way. So we're extremely pleased that all of you had joined us, and look forward that you would be able to take away a lot of things from this conference. Thank you very much. And thank you once again, Deepaji, for Excellency Deepaji, for joining us and one more thing which I would like to mention is Deepaji is the mentor of this conference, and she has been helping us with various things and how to put it together. Thank you very much, Deepaji, once again. And once again, I would like to thank Excellency Ambassador for his unstinted support to E.A.MUNC and Indian School Algebra. Thank you very much, sir. I look forward to knowing that you are going to enjoy this conference very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your thoughtful words, sir. Up next is a video presentation giving us an overview of the committee topics of the first virtual E.A.MUNC 2020.
Our first ever virtual conference is here. Welcome to E.A.MUNC Model United Nations Conference 2020. What is E.A.MUNC? E.A.MUNC Model United Nations is a simulation of the actual United Nations conference where students are tasked with solving global issues through research, drafting, lobbying, and debate to pass a suitable resolution. These conferences showcase an ideal way for you to challenge yourself and improve your research, communication, and leadership skills. It also inculcates teamwork spirit. Shri E.A.MUNC was an Indian politician who served as Minister of External Affairs in the Manmohan Singh government. He was a member of the Parliament for 25 years and a legislator for 18 years. E.A.MUNC honors the fine memory of Shri E.A.MUNC, who had represented India in the Security Council of United Nations 10 times as the voice of India. The theme of our virtual conference is Getting Ahead of Global Challenges. Prevention has always been better than cure, and in matters concerning the world, getting ahead of global challenges is an embodiment of that spirit. 5 committees will run the conference. Security Council, DISAC, UNHRC, UNILO, UNFAO. Topics of discussion for the conference are Security Council, addressing territorial, commercial and military claims in the Arctic. The Arctic region has considerable influence over the economic, commercial and military development of surrounding Arctic region countries. There have been territorial claims and disputes regarding this region. At the Security Council, discussions will be held so as to ensure these issues are addressed comprehensively. DISAC, regulation of private military contractors. There has been widespread discussion regarding the ethicality of hiring mercenaries to fight catastrophe-breeding events such as wars. Such actions have sparked controversy as the reason mercenaries fight is money. In the committee sessions, we aspire to come up with innovative measures to tackle the topic at hand. UNHRC, combating illicit organ trafficking. Organ trafficking, a lucrative global trade, refers to the trade of human organs for transplants. The data regarding the extent of organ trafficking and the complete integration of this problem within the umbrella of human trafficking is still lacking. These are some of the issues that the UNHRC hopes to address during committee sessions. UNILO, eradication of forced labor. Forced labor is any work or service which people are forced to do against their will under the menace of penalty. Forced labor arises in the setting of poverty, shortage of jobs and education, as well as ineffective rule of law, corruption, and economic dependence on cheap labor. UNFAO, improvement and implementation of food security systems in Africa. Food insecurity is a significant global concern. Approximately 1 billion people are suffering from starvation. In sub-Saharan Africa, the number is estimated at 239 million. Rising food prices and food riots are some of the several manifestations of the prevailing food crisis. We at E.A.MUNC strongly believe in diplomacy and negotiation skill, discussion and teamwork, arousing a desire to uplift everyone equally, consensus, to adopt a resolution that takes the widest range of ideas. We wish you the very best.
The guest of honor for this afternoon, Her Excellency Deepa Vadwa, has been a distinguished career diplomat in the Indian Foreign Service. She was the first Indian woman to be appointed ambassador to the Gulf state of Qatar and later Japan. She has also been India's ambassador to Sweden, Latvia, and Republic of Marshall Islands. May I request the guest of honor, Her Excellency Deepa Vadwa, to enlighten the delegates with her words.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Your Excellency, Ambassador Munu Mahawar, it's such a pleasure to be calling you Excellency. It's a long association, knowing you as a young diplomat and really see you flower in this career. You and Nutan is, such a source of happiness to me and Anil. So wonderful to be seeing you there. And in an embassy in a country which is extremely dear to me. I never served there. I was in Qatar, but I was a frequent visitor, as everyone who knows me in Muscat will tell you that I was very often there. So I'm so happy to be invited here and to share a platform, even a virtual platform with you. Mr. Raiz Ahmed, again, a very, very old friend now. So happy to be associated with the E.A.MUNC Model United Nations Conference. Thank you for making me a part of this. Chairman of the E.A.MUNC, members of the management committee, teachers of ISG, a lot of whom I know, friends, young and old. It gives me great pleasure to be associated yet again with the E.A.MUNC Model United Nations Conference and deliver the keynote address on the occasion. I am so pleased to see that these are young minds spread all around, actually, in about 10 countries, I heard Mr. Ahmed say. This is what is one of the, a challenge of COVID has always also provided us an opportunity, I think, to virtually reach out to far more young people across the world. So we also meet on a very special day, which is the 75th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations. Before I really speak, I must talk about my own association with Minister E.A.MUNC. Interestingly, we met at a UN conference. It was in Copenhagen. It was called the UN Social Summit. And this is more than 25 years ago. And somewhere, I think, from being a minister and someone one looked up to, he adopted me as a member of the family. And I really miss him, and I have the greatest respect for Minister E.A.MUNC. So I'm really, really happy to be associated with this endeavor to keep his memory alive. As with Ambassador Mahavar, my own association with the UN goes back to Geneva, actually. I started in Geneva many years ago, doing, I think, much of what he was doing. My professional contact, however, had started a little earlier, about 30 years ago. And I remember thinking that this was the most amazing microcosm that you could find of the world. When you walk into a UN meeting and find about 193 now, it used to be 192 countries, representatives together there deliberating on issues which affect the lives and fates of all mankind. It is a tremendous experience. The UN, as you know, was built on the ruins and destruction of a global war. And as Ambassador Mahavar just told us, I think one of his greatest successes has been that we have not seen a global war since of that dimension. It was born as a symbol of hope and belief in the intrinsic goodness of the human race. And I think our yearning for peace and prosperity, and which was based on very lofty principles of equality of all states, big and small, the dignity of all human beings, rich and poor, regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, religion, and nationality. And yet, as we look today and we try to write the report card of the UN and grade its performance in the past 75 years, there will be many who quite rightly question its success and point to the exacerbation, as we can see today in many areas, of geopolitical tensions, the persistence of underdevelopment with all its various manifestations, the disruptive influences, the disruption caused by climate change and other deleterious effects of environmental degradation, and what seems to be in recent times a seeming surge in violence and human rights violations, the persistence of the scourge of terrorism. We also have other reasons to be dissatisfied. For example, the long malingering reform of the UN Security Council, which points to an anachronistic world. And we do find that on many fronts, perhaps the UN has not delivered as much as we would like. But I was just thinking that it's a birthday. And on a birthday, let us think of good things as much as we can. And one of the reasons also is that in the last few years, what we saw was maybe the last few decades were the decades of globalization. And this was when we were growing symbiotic interdependencies among countries. And then suddenly we have seen a shrinking. We have seen withdrawal of countries and continents into sort of protective skills, in their protective shells. And, thinking that they form exclusive groupings where they can work together. But suddenly, just when we think that we don't need a world which is, all embracing, along comes this COVID-19 pandemic. And what it does is it completely, I think, breaks down all barriers that there are, all geographical boundaries, all political boundaries, these as artificial walls that have been created by us, showing giving us a realization that really there is a need for us to work together for the survival of us as a race and of the planet. As Ambassador Mahavar said, the UN perhaps could do more, but which other body could we have located our global efforts to be able to handle this pandemic? And therefore, maybe in some ways, if there was no United Nations, no WHO, at this point of time, we might have had to invent one. So what the UN did over these 75 years is to create structures, an edifice of structures. These have evolved over the years. They have not been static to some extent to tackle extant issues and challenges. And we are talking today of global challenges such as they were, and also emerging challenges as we could expect in a very dynamic and diverse world. These structures were all built on the common will of countries to cooperate. And to cooperate in what areas? To maintain international peace and security, in a way to secure the peace, to correct the historical wrongs of colonialism, which had impoverished the larger part of the world, resulting in unacceptable inequalities, which unfortunately persist till today, and reinforce the rights of people not only to choose their own governments and to govern themselves, but also the right to development, which has been very important for countries such as us. And right to development and a life of dignity based on the, and I quote here from the resolution on the right to development, which says that the dignity based on the inalienable human right of every human person to participate in, contribute to, and enjoy economic, social, cultural, and political development, unquote. The UN, when we look back, was really born at that tumultuous point of history in which there had been a world war. The world community had been actually mute spectators to huge devastation across the globe. And the genocide of large numbers of people based on ethnicity, as well as at that point of time, if we look, there was the inhuman segregation of human beings in several parts of the world, several parts of the developed world, as we know today, on the basis of race. This also was what made the need of an institution to draft the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which codified much of what we take so much for granted today, issues such as gender equality, racial equality, and a lot more. This has been another great contribution of the UN to the world, the development of international law on issues that affect all of us. And this has been a very, very dynamic process. These are issues which are negotiated under the aegis of the UN with the participation and the will of all member states. Like Ambassador Mahavar said, in the course of my career, I had the privilege of being associated with various issues. I handled the UN from the ministry for a period of time. But what I remember very acutely is my own association with the drafting of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, from its evolution, when it was just an idea, which was very hotly debated in among scientists as being an uncertainty. No one was really sure whether climate change was happening or not. And then it moved to a conviction among the UN member states that we needed to take measures, whether it was happening or not, because the measures in themselves were important to human safety, because temperatures were rising. And from there on, we worked to stabilize greenhouse gas concentrations within a time frame, which would allow, and I quote again, ecosystems to adapt naturally to climate change and enable economic development in a sustainable manner. You know, for all of us today, we don't question climate change, but those were times we lived through when the whole concept was not thought about before and it had been put on the international agenda. And in all of this, the emphasis on economic development was also very important to us as third world countries, because climate change was going to put an additional burden on us as we already struggled with underdevelopment. So we negotiated that based on the principle of common but differentiated responsibility. Much has happened since on climate change. It's no longer an uncertainty. We're really, I think, facing the effects of climate change and there is much more willingness to work together on mitigation and adaptation to climate change. But all of this would not have happened if it had not been birthed in the UN. So today, at 75 years of UN, we have to look back and we have to thank the existence of such an unique institution where we could get together and make sure that we could work for the common good of the world. There are many such examples of the UN being the platform for the development of laws, programs, outreaches related to disarmament, humanitarian natural disasters, and many other global threats. I'm happy to see that the agenda for this MUN covers many important issues. And what is interesting is that some are old and they're continuum, some are new with new faces. Sustainable development goals, we earlier had something called the MDGs. This was the Millennium Development Goals. And I recall the Millennium Development Goals were never negotiated. They were in a way just thrust on us. And there were a lot of people who were not very happy with the way it had evolved. But the Sustainable Development Goals by themselves, I think they were the outcome of very protracted negotiations. And they identified the key priority areas that everybody would look at. In this, there was an underlying calculus, and I think this was the understanding that peace and security was very intricately connected to and interdependent on development. So Agenda 2030, with its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, provides a standard for countries to benchmark themselves and also for international cooperation. The SDGs have been mainstreamed, I think, into the work of the entire UN system, and I think has great acceptability today around the world. The other three subjects that were mentioned to me at this MUNC are some, as I said, some are old, some are new faces of old problems. But these are all certainly challenges which young minds should apply themselves and perhaps come out with solutions which are eluding us as adults. Illicit trafficking in human organs, this terrible thing and a horrifying reality of countries, and it's a part of transnational or transboundary crime, which is being tackled, I think, by the UN Office on Drugs and Crime in Vienna. But this is an adjunct. We talked about human trafficking, and then we find human trafficking plus trafficking in organs. And this happens among the most vulnerable. In many cases, it is refugees who, for one reason or the other, have to relocate geographies due to war, poverty, environmental degradation, and so on. So I think this is a very pertinent issue. Then again, forced labor. I recall in my days in Geneva that forced labor was very much on the agenda of the ILO. And this was about 30 years ago. We should have seen the eradication of this. But what we find is that has resurfaced with in a new form. And so I think forced labor is again an issue which somehow seems to not go away, but keeps manifesting itself in new forms as the world progresses. The third and very interesting one, which in fact, the fact that it was on the agenda made me read about it, was the regulation of private military contractors. Now, this is a very amoral issue. And what is a bit sad is that it has the endorsement of some permanent members of the Security Council. And this has really resulted in the most egregious of human rights violations around the world. So I think this needs to be certainly attended to as a human rights issue, but is a much more important security issue. So I'm really glad that young minds are going to apply themselves. They've done research, have looked at it, are probably going to come out with solutions. And I hope we can actually plug this into the UN system. In concluding, I would just like to make 2 points. First is that there's been a major change in the UN from the days that we first went there as representatives of our countries. And that is that it has moved from a purely intergovernmental body with voices which were heard were representatives of governments such as ourselves, to a body which recognizes that multi-stakeholders all have a role to play in the deliberations and outcomes of the UN. This is explicitly recognized in Agenda 2030 of the Sustainable Development Goals. And it calls on business, it calls on academia, it calls on civil society, and interestingly calls on youth. Yes, youth, and that is all the young people who are listening here today, that you have to be active participants in the UN processes, because the decisions that we are making today is going to be the reality of tomorrow. So it's very important that we hear your voice. And the second is, as mentioned by Ambassador Mahavar, that we are passing through a very difficult phase in our history. I think completely unanticipated, without precedent. I think we're all struggling, to be able to contain this pandemic. But we must also acknowledge perhaps that in this crisis, there is an opportunity, or we must find an opportunity. And this is an opportunity to sort of re-engineer the way we work. I think we need to actually, at this point of time, strengthen multilateral institutions, strengthen the UN, and to be able to, from the lessons and the experience of this pandemic, create a truly equitable, prosperous, peaceful, and sustainable world order. Again, thank you so much for inviting me. It really is wonderful to reach out to young people. I hope you're going to enjoy this process, and all the best with what you do. Thank you so much again.
Thank you for your insightful words, ma'am. The keynote address has set the tone for the conference. The students of Indian School Al-Gubra will now present a cover of the song, We Are the World.
There are people dying all this time.
May I now request our chief guest, His Excellency Manu Mahavar, to declare the first virtual E.A.MUNC Model United Nations Conference in session.
I declare the E.A.MUNC Model United Nations Sessions Conference in session.
Thank you, sir. With this, we have come to the end of the opening ceremony. We would like to thank the chief guest, His Excellency Manu Mahavar, the guest of honor, Her Excellency Deepa Vadva, and the esteemed dignitaries present here for taking time out of their busy schedule to be here with us. The delegates are requested to join their respective virtual committee meetings immediately. Thank you, and I hope you have a memorable conference.